Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast, a conversation aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction recovery, and homelessness. Each interview will include one's personal experiences and insights, or an expert's advice and knowledge within one of these fields. The goal is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brennan Cutuli. We are here today for Season 2, Episode number 17 with Alana Cohen. Alana is a speech-language pathologist who became aware of gut health when noticing her daughter's mood swings. Alana took initiative to research and implement a healthy diet in order to teach her daughter the importance of health. Alana authored a book called The Buggies in Bella's Belly in order to teach families the importance of children's gut health. Alana joins the Mental Insights Podcast to speak about gut health and the way it manifests within children today. Alana, thank you for taking this time to be on the Mental Insights Podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to speak with you today.
So am I. When, I really read and understood more about what you did in terms of, making this realization within your own family and then translating it outwards, I thought it would be a great topic because you're implementing at a young age, and people will try to maybe look at this that only children need to do it, but this is kind of relative towards all our life. So this can be implemented throughout all ages, but it's great that you're really implementing this at a young age, which is really where it all starts. So I'm so glad you were able to do this. And to really, start within, how this all happened, can you give us kind of the story about how you really were able to connect the mood swings and behavioral changes with gut health, and just speak about how kind of this transition happened within noticing this of your daughter and then realizing how diet was such a large part in these behavioral and mood swing issues?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it's so important to share stories like this, because otherwise as parents, we don't learn about these types of things. We don't even think of connecting the dots between these things. And that's actually really why we decided to go out there and really share our story, because it's so common. And I think that, unfortunately, the pediatricians that we're going to, while they're great at many, resolving acute illnesses and also, very important things, infections, things like that, they're just not, the appointment schedules and the time that you have in your appointment, it's just not geared towards these more types of chronic conditions that slowly take root. And so I think it's really important to just hear from other parents. So basically, that's part of how I started to, I guess the question, right, is how did I put together the pieces if it wasn't from my doctor, right? That's like, usually people have an issue and they go to the doctor. So I did. That was my first step when I started noticing a few different symptoms in my daughter. You mentioned mood swings, which we did notice, but I had no idea. I just thought that those were like, typical kid mood swings. I would talk to other parents and they would also, commiserate with me and, and say, oh, that happened to my daughter and this and that. And I thought that it was, in the beginning, I thought it was kind of normal. It started happening more often. And I started realizing that it was probably not normal. The types of mood swings she was having, she would really get stuck in her tantrums. This was when she was really around 3 years old, is when it started building up more. She would get very stuck in these types of tantrums, and they would also just kind of come about out of nowhere. I mean, she could wake up in happy mood and then it would just suddenly change, and a lot of different symptoms that kind of made me start to realize that maybe this wasn't normal. But I thought that was like something totally separate that I was going to have to deal with, maybe get therapy, medications that worried me too, but I wasn't. We were just kind of starting to figure out what to do on that path. And then, but she also around the same time had some other symptoms that I actually did take her to the pediatrician for. She had, after being on a round of antibiotics, she started developing some itching, some like vaginal itching, which, I assumed, oh, maybe yeast infection, and brought her to the pediatrician. They looked, they said, no, nothing's there, maybe irritation. And they actually, the best advice they gave me was not to give her bubble baths, which I told the doctor that I wasn't, and I still wanted some type of answer. What do I do? And they just didn't change their recommendation. That was really all they could suggest. So when the problem didn't go away, I went back to the pediatrician again, and same kind of thing. Saw nothing. Did a urine sample, and I just kind of realized, okay, they're not really taking the concern so seriously, or they're telling me it's nothing, but I know that it's not nothing, because I know that something's going on. But that was still kind of going on in the background. Then one morning, my daughter, again, she woke up. I guess this is when I started to finally started to put some of the pieces together. One morning, my daughter woke up. She woke up in a happy mood. We started getting ready for school. She wanted, I think, Cheerios and milk, and I got it for her. And then all of a sudden, like I said, how sometimes her moods can kind of just switch. Something switched, and she started really, going really crazy, really. I mean, she didn't want it. She pushed it away out of nowhere. And she was suddenly on the floor, I mean, she was, she dove into this tantrum, and she got stuck there. And my first instinct always is really to provide love, that connection. I truly understand, that, I already come from the angle of that. I don't think that, misbehaviors or things like that are I think that they're coming from something, skills that either need to be learned in the child, or that they need more connection. Well, there's a lot I could go into about that, but not to get off track. I always try first with love and connection, and it wasn't working. Her mind was stuck in this. And as I went down to kind of give her a hug, I noticed that, like, her breath stunk. And I had been kind of noticing that lately, but then I just started thinking, I was like, I think when her moods are the worst, I notice that her breath is also really bad. And I mean, she's 3 years old. We brush her teeth, she's eating, at my opinion at that time, I mean, pretty well. She wasn't like a big, candy eater or anything like that would cause anything in the mouth. I mean, I was just like, this doesn't make sense, and I started to realize, maybe there's actually something, maybe her body is sick, and it's not like a stay home from school fever kind of sick, but maybe something is going on, and maybe this is all related. And that's how the wheel started turning. And that's really what got me thinking. I started researching on my own, looking things up, doing a lot of reading, and I came across a lot about gut health, and actually yeast overgrowth, or candida, which happened to be what was going on in her case. And when I realized, and I saw, like, when I was reading about it, all of these symptoms that she was having, and even more symptoms that I didn't realize were even connected also, that she had, that I thought, rashes that would come and go, and this and that. And I mean, everything was really related to this. And when we started actually going that route and treating that, it was truly amazing. I mean, she did a 180 in everything. She just looked like a healthy kid again. She had, her breath was clear again. Her moods were good. She wasn't like, I wasn't afraid to set her off at something that I said. I could not be afraid of a reaction from her. She was happy. She was thriving. She was more social. I mean, it was amazing, the type of turnaround we saw. So I'm sorry, I know I just spoke for a while, but that's basically the chain of events that helped us to realize what was actually going on.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Alana. And I think it's a true testament to, how really challenging and how many different avenues you have to go down in order to really find the root cause if, you're not educated upon, what gut health is. And I think, it's something that really hasn't been talked about in terms of, how impactful it can be within, mental, in terms of, behaviors, thoughts. And it's certainly something that, as you said, it can take a lot of different research and a lot of different ways in order to look at it. And even as you said, you go to pediatricians and they don't provide those answers in terms of educating you on of the importance of diet. And as you made this realization of taking this research and understanding more about what gut health is, what the microbiome does in order to connect with the mind, can you just explain more and just give a brief synopsis of what gut health is for anybody out there who may not know, and just what kind of impact it can have within our mind and our body?
Yes, definitely. So basically, right, what is this term? It's kind of like a trendy term now too, but gut health is basically referring to the bacteria, the fungus, the microbes, like all the different germs or bugs basically that live in our body. There's good bacteria, I'll just call them bacteria, good bacteria, there's bad bacteria. And what's happening now, why this is becoming such a big topic now, is that recently, especially in this generation, also in our generation growing up, but especially the current generation, um, we have, I mean, it's almost everybody, I would say, so many people, I don't know about almost everybody, but it's so common to have overgrowth of this bad bacteria because of a few different reasons. I'll just kind of briefly go over. First of all, we have so much exposure to antibiotics that even if, let's say, our kids haven't been on antibiotics yet, which also is rare. I mean, they're really prescribed for so many things.
Mhm.
We ourselves, as the parents, have likely been on antibiotics, and so just that alone, we're not passing down the same good bacteria, because what antibiotics do is they kill. Of course, they're very important. They kill the bad bacteria that's causing whatever infection you have, but they also kill the good bacteria at the same time. Um, so we are really depleting that good bacteria that helps our body to thrive and keeps our body in check and balance. And we're not really replenishing it. So this bad bacteria can kind of then uh, overgrow afterwards, because I'll just get very quickly into the second cause of why we're not replenishing it. In the past, we used to eat much more fermented foods. We had more contact with soil and with healthy dirt, and that would replenish our good bacteria. So now we're not taking in the good bacteria, and we're also killing all the bad and we're also killing all the good bacteria. So it's just really leaving our guts really damaged in a way. And the thing is that I'm just going to go briefly back to the antibiotics thing. Even if your kids haven't been on antibiotics, a lot of mothers at birth are now being put on IV antibiotics. And there's so much commotion at birth, we might not even realize exactly if you have or haven't, but if you tested positive for group B strep, which is very, very common in women, then you're preventatively put on IV antibiotics during birth. And also if you have a C-section, you are put on IV antibiotics, and the babies also are not being exposed to the bacteria from passing through the birth canal. So we are just really missing out on a lot of that good bacteria today.
It certainly shows how many different factors can come into play in terms of providing the right bacteria for us to be healthy, and for our body to really work throughout this process and try to allow for this good bacteria to take over. And as you stated, there's definitely a lot of different factors in terms of the lifestyles within our society today that have changed as to why we need a larger focus on this. And within most people's, I think, knowledge, we can know that processed foods and sugars are bad for our gut health. They're bad for our health in general. And speaking on the topic of some foods to avoid, what sort of ingredients should be avoided in foods that provide this bad bacteria within our gut?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because actually before we even started learning about this in depth, I actually thought we ate pretty healthy. And I didn't realize the types of things or the types of things that are added to even regular food products nowadays. Whereas let's say in our generation, these might have been okay products, but now today, so some people say, oh, I ate that when I was growing up and I turned out fine. And, there's two parts of that question. First of all, I mean, that's in their own opinion. Who knows? Did they really turn out fine? Are they battling with chronic issues now? Are they going to be battling with chronic issues in a few years? But also maybe they did turn out okay, but that's because they were not actually eating the same things. That might have looked the same, but the ingredients that have been added just in the past couple of decades are really, really, really damaging. So we have things like preservatives, artificial food colorings, artificial flavors. There's these things that are added to a lot of our processed foods, but even things like that you wouldn't really expect, like even soups and like even I'm just going to give this example quick of like pickles, which actually in the past used to be a fermented food. They were made, you put cucumbers in a jar, you fill it with water and salt brine, and it actually it preserves the cucumber, turns it into a pickle, and it actually is packed with good bacteria. The good bacteria grows, and it's a real true health food. But if you look in the supermarket shelves today and you look at a jar of pickles, you're going to see, and I did this like the other day, you see in most of the brands yellow food coloring to make it have that yellowish appearance. You see artificial preservatives, which are known to be like, in other countries are not even allowed in their products because they're considered to be like neurotoxins. They've taken these foods that look fine, and I'm not even talking about candy and junk right now. That's another topic. Even these foods that look fine, and you have to really pay attention to the ingredients nowadays. You just do a quick ingredient check and make sure that everything is pronounceable, that everything is looks like a familiar, if it doesn't look like a familiar word, it's probably not going to be great. But to give a quick rundown of things that would be good to avoid in general, just the refined sugars, refined flours. High fructose corn syrup is a big one. It's added to almost everything nowadays: ketchup, soups, everything. High fructose corn syrup. We've got artificial food coloring, artificial flavors, preservatives, refined oils like canola oil and vegetable oils. Vegetable oil doesn't sound bad, right? It sounds like, what could be wrong with vegetables? But the way that they produce these types of oils is this really artificial type process. I mean, it's very the way that they process the oils. I don't want to get into it right now, but it's really damaging process, and they're actually really harmful to the body. They cause a lot of inflammation. So there's part of what I also talk about in I actually also just recently published my parents' guide to gut health. It's called Let Kids Be Kids: The Parents' Guide to Gut Health. And I talk in it also how, I'm not a nutritionist. I have worked with nutritionists, and I really respect them for their knowledge base, and the best people they're probably the best ones to actually guide you in what types of things to avoid and what to eat, because it also could be different for everybody based on your own sensitivities and things like that. So I've learned a lot in that area, but my focus is more in like, let's say now what to avoid, then okay, but how are we actually going to do this? How are we actually going to make it possible? How can I actually get my family on board with this? Because it sounds like, even just hearing it now, it probably sounds overwhelming. Like, oh my God, I have to look at everything we're eating and change our whole pantry. It can feel overwhelming to start.
It certainly can, and I appreciate you had some, I think, wonderful insights within, all that message. And, obviously the one, the first one being of like you said, if you can't read or pronounce what is in the ingredients, then it probably shouldn't be put into your body. And I think that's one of the great lessons that people can learn, and it's quick. Just flip around what you're looking to buy, and just take 30 seconds in order to see if you can properly pronounce what's in the food that you're going to be putting into your body, which is definitely something that I think people, are unaware of. They just look at the shelf, grab something, and they'll move on with their day. And then, the second point of, not everybody is going to need the same food in order to properly produce, a great gut health. And there's a company called Viome, which actually does testing for gut health. And it's shown, obviously, because if you look at someone's gut health and it's not properly, it's really not working well. You have a lot of bad bacteria. For different people, it's dependent upon your diet. So if two people are having completely different diets, but they both still have, negative gut health, it could be different in terms of the way their body reacts with certain foods in order for them to really get that next step. And even when you take your body from bad to good gut health, once you're at good gut health, there could even be different foods that'll even more positively affect you. So, diets can always change. And really, what the first step is, obviously, what we're saying today is try to get rid of those negative effects from some of these, ingredients, as you said, of trying to avoid these in order to, truly change your diet. And like you're saying, for some people it could seem very overwhelming, but it's a step that you have to take, because if you do it now, in the long run, in 50 years from now, it's only going to help you, and it's going to
Exactly.
avoid you from experiencing these chronic illnesses. And it doesn't only change, as we're saying, your body's health. It changes the way that you interact with people, your
Right.
relationships, the way you communicate. There's so many different things that arise. And I think this is one thing that we can touch on, as well as, you spoke about some of, the things that you noticed within your daughter, within behavioral changes, within mood swings, within bad breath. What other challenges can arise from an unhealthy gut?
Right, exactly. You bring up such great points too. There are so many different symptoms that can arise from having poor gut health, and the reason why is because certain people might be predisposed to acting to certain things, while others are predisposed to others. So when the body gets kind of like, I'm going to call it like sick with this chronic inflammation, um, what happens when your gut health, when your gut health is poor, is that it kind of sets off the alarm signals in your body. um, it kind of, the body is like alerted, like something's wrong, we're not things are overgrowing, we need to kind of fix this. And it sets off the alarms, and it tries to kind of fix the problem, but then it's not like, and this is kind of how inflammation starts, that keyword inflammation that you've probably been hearing. So inflammation, you can compare it to, let's say, like an outward injury. So like, let's say you sprain your ankle, and your ankle gets red and kind of swollen and inflamed. That's inflamed, but that's an area on the outside of the body. You can see it, and you also, you'll make sure to take care of your ankle. You won't walk on it until it's feeling better. You'll maybe do some things to help the recovery. But what's happening inside our bodies is the inside of our bodies are getting inflamed, and it's not like one injury that you notice. It's kind of more like a lot of little pricks that just never stop happening. So what happens is the body sets off the alarms. It tries to go tend to the, it kind of like, you could think of it marking it in red, just like that swollen ankle, but it's marking it, and it's just never really getting better, because it just keeps on happening, because we continue uh, uh, feeding the body these foreign substances that it doesn't recognize, these foreign foods, these ingredients, and the bad bacteria is getting out of control, and like the body is like, oh my god, like what's going on? It never ends. So what happens when the body stays inflamed for a time like that? You get chronic inflammation, And when the gut is inflamed, when the body is inflamed, there's actually this cranial nerve that that goes directly from the gut to the brain. It's called the vagus nerve. It's a very important nerve, and it's like a highway between the two. So they are connected in so many ways. They actually send messages to each other all the time. They communicate with each other. The gut communicates with the brain, and the brain communicates with the gut. And when this is going on in the body, the gut is sending all these crazy messages to the brain. And not only that, it's not creating, the gut is also responsible for, actually, a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of the hormones critical for brain function are even produced in the gut. A lot of the key bodily functions are produced in the gut. And the gut actually even, it even like digests the vitamins that we're getting and then makes the vitamins available to the body and the brain. So when the gut is not working well, the brain is not getting the resources it needs. It's not getting the vitamins it needs. It's not getting the hormones like serotonin, dopamine, things that are critical for brain function. And it's also getting these crazy messages from the gut saying like, attack, attack, the body's on fire, you know? So the brain, depending on the person, you know, and like I said earlier, what they might be predisposed to, they'll get all these different types of symptoms. Some people might have difficulties with attention. Some people might have these difficulties with mood swings, like my daughter had, tantrums, and you know, some people might have also sensory difficulties. My daughter actually also had a lot of sensory issues, like she would getting ready for school. I mean, she would have to take off putting on her socks and her shoes. The seam on her socks bothered her. And then even when she got her socks on, okay, then the shoes, they felt too tight, and her clothes, they felt too tight on her. Like I bought her clothing that was like 2 sizes too big on her. And I felt like ridiculous, but what was I going to do? She was uncomfortable. And I believed her. I trusted her that she was really uncomfortable, and she was, you know? So she, you know, things just felt too tight. They felt uncomfortable on her. So people could have all different types of sensory issues. Some people even, it's sensory issues with noises, loud noises bother them, or different feelings. I mean, literally every communication can be impacted. And this is something that I never would have even considered. You know, I was trained, of course, I'm a certified speech pathologist, and this is not something that we really are taught about communication in school. You know, that we don't have a nutrition class in our speech pathology school. You know, we don't think about these connections, but they really are actually, I mean, the brain is so impacted by our gut in so many different ways.
It shows really how complex, you know, the human mind and body is. And, you know, as well as you've stated, it can be so hard to connect these symptoms with something such as gut health. And I think, you know, that's why you can really need this education throughout everybody, because, you know, somebody can look at these symptoms, go to a pediatrician, and then be told something completely opposite of what they should do. And, you know, as we're saying here, you know, the lifestyle within the household can be so crucial in terms of a child's development. And, you know, it all starts really with what you're putting in your body, and it can have such drastic effects if it's not done accordingly. And within, you know, your own story, you were able to notice it, say, probably earlier than most within, you know, some of these changes within your daughter. And, you know, I want to know how quickly can inadequate gut health really affect a child? You know, how quickly can this transition happen?
That's a great question. And yeah, we are fortunate that we recognize this so early on. And even 3, like looking back now, like you know, I wish we had even recognized it sooner, you know, but yeah, this can poor gut health can start as early on as you know, babies, birth, even, you know, during you know, what, I don't want to make people too crazy, but during pregnancy, what you're eating can also start to affect you know, the baby. But really, birth, I would say, is where the baby's gut health is born, also because they're getting exposed, hopefully, to the good bacteria during birth. But if they're not, and actually, like I said a little bit earlier, since we as parents have been on antibiotics throughout our lifetimes, and we are not passing on the same types of good bacteria as we used to in the past, many babies today are being born before anything that we're feeding them, before anything like that, are being born with without the strains of good bacteria that they need. There's a really important strain of good bacteria. It's called B. infantis, and it actually helps babies digest breast milk. And that's one of the strains that it's. I think I've seen studies even like 3 out of 4 mothers are not passing down enough of this strain. And so sometimes you'll see babies that have like colic, or they're gassy, or they're having trouble with their bowel movements, and it really could be something as simple as them just not having needing some probiotics and not having the right strains of good bacteria that are helping them digest what they're eating as babies. And then so sometimes this came up the other day when I was talking to somebody, you might have a baby that just seemed to be born as like a difficult baby. They were crying a lot and this and that, and then as they got older into their toddler years, they were just kind of difficult and crying or whining or whatever. And I was explaining to them, it might not be that they're just such, that they were born that way, that this is their personality. It could just be that their body was kind of always, or from the very beginning, fighting this chronic inflammation, which was then affecting their mood and their personality. It's something that you can start working on as early as at birth, I would say.
It's such a great point, because I think people do kind of aren't. I don't think they're truly aware about how important it is, especially, as you're saying, when you're having a child. And it's not that, when you have a child, you just give them all the good genes, or all the good aspects of yourself, passing down to a child. So, when you're going through pregnancy, there's such an important aspect of what you're feeding yourself and what you're putting throughout your body, because, once your child's born, it's up to their body, their mind, in order to, process and deal with the things that you provided them. And, as you're saying, it can be something as bad bacteria starting right at birth. And if, you don't allocate the right resources like you did, by 3 years old, it could be 20 years down the line where this child sees, many different challenges throughout their own life due to, something that could have started, at the beginning of their birth.
Right, exactly. And other things also that that symptoms that people might see, like that are very common also in our children today, that like all these autoimmune conditions like allergies, asthma, eczema, those are also actually what we call the startings of like autoimmune type reactions, where the body where do they come from? The body starts kind of like attacking itself in these ways. And no one really thinks about, well, wait a minute, why is the body attacking itself? And it's actually a result of having the chronic inflammation in the body. So some people might not be dealing with the mood symptoms as children. They might have like, all these autoimmune conditions, the allergies and the asthma and the eczema and things like that. And then as they get older, these conditions kind of develop into other chronic ailments, and something also in terms of mood, like let's say something starts out as mood swings in a kid, and you think of it, oh, they're just, toddler tantrums, terrible twos, things like that. But then later on, it could progress to, needing behavioral evaluations, needing therapy, needing this and that. So there are a lot of different routes that it can turn into if you don't start addressing it when the children are young. And that's why actually, sorry about that. That's why actually some people ask me like, wow, how did you do that? How did you make all these changes? It must have been so much work. And I say, do you know how much easier it is having a child who, I don't have to worry about exploding at any moment, and I don't have to worry, and she's not getting sick anymore, and she's not having these all these different random symptoms that I didn't know what to do with. I mean, it's so much easier having made these changes, even though they're a new habits to get used to in the beginning. I can't even explain how much easier it is having made those changes.
Thank you so much for that, Alana. I think, so far we've given some great insights into, how you were able to identify some of these symptoms and use it in order to, see some of the challenges that can come into play and, what you need to avoid within gut health for a child and even for people of all ages. And I think it definitely provides good insight into, what gut health is and the impact it could have within, you know, within someone's, everyday functions. It's not just the body. So, I'd love to thank you for taking this time with me. And within the next part of this episode, we're going to be speaking more about the steps that you can take to improve your child's gut health, what you can provide for them, not only with their diet, but say vitamins, supplements, and what steps you could take if you see some of these symptoms today. So thank you for taking this time out with me, Alana. And please, everybody, make sure to tune in to the next part of this episode to hear about what you can do to take this next step.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. This was season 2, episode number 17 of the Mental Insights podcast. And please be sure to let us know what you think of this episode and tune in to part 2 to hear more from Alana Cohen. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Mental Insights podcast. Make sure to reach out to today's guest or myself if you need any advice, guidance, or support in your life today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast so we know what you thought of this episode. I look forward to being in touch with you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.